Welcome to the Bread and Butter Developer Podcast, where we pair two related projects in Web3 who are aiming to solve similar problems in their own way. And with us, we have a very interesting episode today, and we're joined by Al Morris, the CEO of Koii Network, and Abner from Polyhedra Network, to really discuss trusted and trustless bridging. And as the Web3 industry grows, bridging technology has become extremely important. And it's also a topic that's often shrouded in misconceptions. And we're really here today to clear up a lot of that now and really kind of have a really well-rounded discussion. It's going to be philosophical, it's going to be technical, and it's really about the role of trust in our technology today. And I think our guests, Al and Abner, are both building bridges in their own way. And we're excited to really hear their perspectives on trusted and trustless bridging. I trust you guys. You guys are amazing. Really, to kind of start it off, Al, Abner, welcome. I'm just going to start the questions off with Abner. What is it that you do? What is your role, and what are you working on?
Thanks, Dylan, for the introduction, and it's our great pleasure to join the Bridge Builder DAO. So, Abner, the co-founder and CEO of Polyhedra Network. So currently, Polyhedra Network is building the next generation of the infrastructure for Web3 interoperability by using advanced zero-knowledge proof protocols. So we provide trust-minimized and high-efficient interoperability solutions for the interoperability in Web3, including token transfers, asset transfers, message passing, and general purpose data interoperability between Web3 systems, which including different layer 1 and layer 2 blockchains. And also we will bridge the users from the traditional Web2 user to Web3. Also use zero-knowledge proof. So we care about scalability of the cross-chain bridge, and also the cross-chain interoperability between heterogeneous system. And also we also consider some privacy solution, especially for data interoperability.
You did an amazing job at explaining that. So thank you for that. And I want to give a warm welcome also to Al. I met Al last year, actually, during, I believe, at Consensus. And we had like this really killer discussion about just really decentralization and understanding ZK with one another. And I want to open the discussion with what you guys are doing at Polyhedra and with what he is also working on at Koii Network. So Al, if you can briefly explain what's your role and what do you do, what are you working on, and what are some of your goals? Please explain. Would love to hear about it.
Of course. So first thing to say, I'm actually not the CEO of Koii Network. Koii Network doesn't have a CEO. We're actually a nonprofit foundation formally. So there's a board and there's kind of a token governance that we're working on. The actual Koii Labs organization that I run is just one of the kind of constellation of companies that are emerging around this technology. So the original genesis is started back in like 2016, 2017. I was lucky enough to meet Taylor Gehring, who was one of the early founders of the Ethereum protocol. And he funded me and a team of people in Chicago to run the Blockchain Institute, formerly weteachblockchain.org. And we ran courses on everything from like kind of getting into Bitcoin and trying out using wallets for the first time, right up to running a smart contract and building a dApp. And the one thing that we saw across the board was every single time that you wanted to build a dApp, there was this problem where you couldn't do it all on a smart contract. So like some very, very basic applications like Uniswap will have just a smart contract with a UI and then use your wallet to send all the RPC calls. So you don't actually have to have anything acting as a server in that system. But as you start to scale up, if you look at gaming, AI, or any of the other kind of larger plays that people are working on now, there's always a need for some kind of off-chain compute somewhere. And the question is, how do you have that happen on one device? Because if you have it happen on a bunch of different devices, the costs go up exponentially. And so we're trying to figure out how to do this trusted, trustless system, exactly like you said, actually. So we'll get into that more, but that's basically what Koii's for. We have a network of now 45,000 people that have RSVP'd to run nodes. We're hoping to get to 1 million. And the idea is that you as a user with a home computer can be a part of this network as a validator, do some off-chain compute and facilitate things. And bridging is one of the things we've been looking at closely.
Wow. So you guys are both tackling this very key issue of making sure that assets are truly decentralized and are able to traverse across different chains in a very secure and trustless manner. And I'd like to understand a little bit deeper about what exactly does decentralization mean to you? Because I don't think anybody just builds this stuff because they feel like it. I think they build this stuff because it actually means something to them. And there's a core, a mission, and a purpose why you're choosing to do this. So what does decentralization mean to you? And really, how does it motivate the way that you build? Abner, can you allude to this a little bit first?
Yeah, I think for decentralization, for the debates of decentralization, is a classical question in the blockchain world. So from the scaling for layer 1 and layer 2 blockchain system, so we have a trilemma of the blockchain system for decentralization, efficiency, and security. So it's like a trade-off between the three concepts of decentralization, security, and efficiency. And for some systems, like for both the cloud computing system and the blockchain system, always we have a trade-off between the three criteria. So for instance, for Bitcoin system is decentralized and is also secure. However, the efficiency of a Bitcoin network for layer 1 is limited. So only 6 to 7 originally on layer 1, only 6 to 7 transactions per second. And if we consider more on security and efficiency, if we think that a centralized service is secure, then we can say that the system of the cloud computing, the traditional internet services, which satisfies efficiency and the security with a sacrifice of decentralization, because this all the user data stored on the centralized databases. And there are also some systems consider decentralization and efficiency with a sacrifice of security, such like some peer-to-peer network, like the BitTorrent, that user generally share the content, share the materials online. The network, the connection is not always reliable, so there are always sometimes that the package, the network package is dropped, or the user privacy is leaked. So because they care about the efficiency and using the BitTorrent network, they can share the document, the huge document, efficiently. So in the traditional discussion, so this is a trilemma between security, decentralization, and efficiency. And what's our goal is that we can treat it as a multi-objective optimization problem of a system, that we want to push forward the efficiency frontier for the multi-objective optimization, that we hope to find the Pareto optimum of the system that achieve both to achieve security, efficiency, decentralization, and push forward the boundary. And for the interoperability we are discussing today, so we also need to consider the decentralization, security, and efficiency. So nowadays there's a lot of attacks in the blockchain system, and we think that for the cross-chain interoperability is vulnerable. It's more vulnerable than the traditional layer 1, layer 2 blockchains, because the security of a block layer 1 can be guaranteed by the consensus mechanism, by the miners in the network, and have a certain level of decentralization. And for layer 2, so the security is built upon the security of the layer 1. So it depends on the security of Ethereum. However, for the cross-chain bridges, so because we are connecting to homogeneous or heterogeneous blockchain system, so the two blockchain systems have different consensus, have different mechanisms. So and also the intercommunication between the two blockchain system. Actually, we don't have a fixed way to do a fully trustless traditionally. So and also we very care about the security comparing with some interoperability traditional problem like the BitTorrent network. So in the cross-chain bridge, we very care about the security because it's about the security of the user assets. And nowadays, more than 2 billion act appeared on the asset bridging from different blockchain systems. So that's we must care about the security, and also the efficiency is also very important for a cross-chain bridge because it will directly influence the user experience for the interoperability, especially for the asset transfer or message passing. So sometimes they need that very fast finality time for transaction from one chain to another chain, and also especially for the data interoperability, some application need instant or very fast response from the message passing from the standard blockchain.
Can you help me allude this a little bit better in terms of what you mean as far as security versus privacy?
Yeah, I think security is that the bridge, and so privacy is also an aspect of security, but the fundamental security is that the trust. It is the secure asset transfer and secure message passing. It's a reliable communication network between the two blockchain system or between a Web 2 system and a Web 3 system.
So Al, I want to ask you the exact same question, and I'm going to try to find some similarities in our discussion here. So can you please tell us what decentralization means to you?
Decentralization motivates the entire Koii organization. So it's pretty much the only reason that we've started to work on this. I would say that the main differentiation between decentralized systems and kind of the traditional internet that we've seen so far is either equity or assurance. And these two kind of play hand in hand, right? Equity means, for the most part, people are getting a piece of the pie at the end of the day. So they're not using some system where they're paying a fee and then they don't see anything except a good quality service. They want a good quality service, and they also want to be part of the movement that spreads that. And so if you're talking about like Ethereum or Bitcoin or any of these, one of the main reasons that they grew so fast was that the people behind them actually got rewarded the more the network grew. And some people would refer to that as a Ponzi scheme, but really it's more like profit sharing, right? It's built-in affiliate marketing. You've got your people actually out there on the streets explaining it in every country around the world. The other side of it, though, is the assurances. And I think that's where a lot of the bridging discussion kind of stems from. This is the notion that you want to have a better experience and a more controlled experience when you're using decentralized systems. So it shouldn't be that you're trusting someone else to do anything, because as soon as you trust someone else, then you're missing out a little bit on the assurances. And at some point down the line, the organization that you trust will eventually fall back on their promises, and they won't be able to hold up their side of the bargain. And you'll be stuck with the investment that you've made in them. And that's kind of what's traditionally happened with centralized companies. Twitter started out as a really great way to find out what was going on around you, and it quickly got transformed into an ad-driven network. And with that, you kind of see this model where they had to pay for the hosting. And so at some point, they had to start building profit streams. Once the profit streams get involved, then you get a lot of kind of sort of money-hungry people around the original founding team. And then that sort of leads to this spiral of like focusing more on the customer versus the community. And so what we think of as kind of the middle ground of these two things is getting people as individuals to be the trusted party behind the contract that's happening. So when you use a service, you're not using the service as a company, you're using the community of people behind it that make it possible. And those people get rewarded the more that the service gets adopted. And so kind of on the Koii side, what that means is if you run a node on your computer, you can be a bridge validator. You can be part of a web scraping community that leads to a new search engine. You can be hosting a social network. You can be pinning files on IPFS. And you can kind of tie all of these things together to give you sort of your personal piece of the larger internet that's being created. Because at the end of the day, most of us don't have that much in terms of hosting needs. Like large companies do, obviously, but as an individual, like I could easily pin all of the files that I want to share with the world on my own computer, and I can get other people to try to replicate them for me and share them around. And so social media could easily be a completely decentralized system where my phone and my computer host all of my files. And with bridging, it's actually very similar. Like if I'm trying to bridge my tokens across, maybe the tokens that I actually earn to pay for that bridge are going to actually be rewarded back to me when I validate other people's transactions to move them around. So on a very high level, that's kind of how I would think about it. I think you kind of totally hit the nail on the head, though. There's a lot of very deep technological concerns here that I think we'll get into.
Cool. And I love the way that you're also alluding to a lot of what Koii is also responsible in doing. And I really appreciate, I read through all of your documentation just to get a better understanding. And I watched all your philosophy videos and I loved all of them. And I like the approach that you have when it comes to radical decentralization. I believe with us at BNB Greenfield, we're trying to accomplish the same thing and radically decentralize the way that we store assets and bridge those assets to other people and to other users, especially when it comes to a data-owned economy. And I think you touched on one really important key point. One major differentiator that I was finding is just when you were explaining trusted versus trustless, you were starting to talk about how we see that in a trusted environment, we see that the company usually falls back on some of their promises. And then in a trustless manner, you really distinguish the difference between customer and consumer. And let's say like the consumer is a group of people, or actually, sorry, my bad, community and customer. And then you looked at it in a way where everybody who is a part of the community is of service. And then I believe in between me message passing between myself and somebody else, you want to place some sort of trustless bridge. And by trustless, I'm assuming what you're saying is that the trustlessness in the community owned aspect of how data is then used or what sorts of technologies are used, like a trustless bridge, that it's actually a part of each individual community service. So everybody is of service, whether they want to opt in or opt out, everyone has that option. So is that sort of what you're doing in terms of how you're establishing a trustless bridge within your network?
That's exactly it. So a community service is a service the community can use that the community provides. And so in the case of the IDEXO bridge, which one of our kind of ecosystem projects is building this out right now, it uses people's home computers to validate the bridge transactions. So they go get an RPC credential, they input it into their Koii node, and then they're going and watching the smart contracts on either chain. And then they basically self-elect to sign those bridging transactions. And then when you have one of these bridging transactions happening, it just bounces around until it's got enough collateral allocated, and then that results in it being issued on the other side. And so it's really completely community driven. And the really cool thing about it is the community gets paid when other people are using it too. So the more they spread the use of this system, the bigger and better it gets. So we're actually integrating it into our Finny wallet pretty soon, hopefully, which will mean that anybody who's using our wallet will then end up actually paying out tokens to other Koii node operators for validating their bridge transactions.
Beautiful. All right. So you guys, I think I see both of your perspectives on both of this. And I want to give Abner one more opportunity to kind of discuss it from his point of view, but I'm gonna lead with a different question now this time. And Al, by the way, thank you for explaining that and how you're planning on implementing it. I'm excited to see how that goes. But Abner, I want to give the question back over to you. Abner, how do you see the solution for trustlessness being solved in the systems like what Koii is doing and what they're doing to build this sort of system for themselves? How do you see the solution actually being properly implemented? What is the core technology you use to enable this trustlessness in user interactions? Can you explain?
Yeah. So for the trust model, so before the discussion of the trustlessness, so let's first discuss the trust model. So traditionally for the bridges, for the traditional bridge system, so generally there are a small group of people. They said it's a bridge committee or the bridge operator. They decide that the state transition between two blockchain systems to build a crossing bridge. So currently, so most of the crossing bridges that are based on a consensus or a mechanism that about the decision model about track the status of the standard chain. And what we are doing is that actually we don't rely on the consensus. So the trust model is not based on a consensus of a group of people or group of miner. So what we trust is that we trust the mathematics. We trust the zero knowledge proofs in our system, that we are using very strict cryptography zero knowledge proof systems to guarantee the status of the standard chain. The consensus of the standard chain is correctly related to the receiver chain. On the receiver chain side, we also rely on the proof verification. Is fully automatically running, so it's a smart contract. We call the updater contract to check the correctness of the prover. So what we are doing is that the trust model is in cryptography, is in math.
Love that. So so let me just make sure that I have it correct. So you're tracking the status of the sender chain, and you're not relying on the consensus of either of the blockchains that you're interoperating. That's not the right word. Interoperating between both of these chains. So you're not relying on that. Instead, what you're actually relying on is strong form cryptography in the form of a zero knowledge proof. And this proof is really just your proof of verifiable correctness between the sender chain. Let's say it's like Ethereum, and let's say the receiver chain is the BNB chain. And on that BNB chain, you have a smart contract that is then acting as the prover. And so my verifier is I would say and assume that it's the sending chain, and then the verifier, the prover is on the other side. Where is the witness?
The witness is about the consensus, the proof of the consensus generating by our provers.
Love that. Okay. Consensus. Okay. It's the proof of consensus. So I see how all that works. And what is the strong form cryptography that is used to do this sort of proof without needing to actually verify that these proofs are done on that blockchain under their consensus? How does a validator, you don't have to go that deep into it, but I guess I just would love to understand a little bit better for everyone hearing is really what is the validator on both of these chains validating then if it's just a zero knowledge proof. And if it's not a part of their consensus, what exactly are they validating? They're validating the fact that smart contract is true and will always be true because of the ZKP. The cryptography is strongly correct. They're relying on the correctness that contract is then reinstantiating. Is that sort of what's happening?
Actually, what we are doing is the proof of consensus of the standard blockchain. So on the receiver chain side, it's just a proof verifier that it's a smart contract to verify the proofs. So for the so we are not doing the proof generation on transaction level. We are doing is that we track the consensus of the standard chain depending on the consensus of the standard chain. So currently currently we can handle different kind of proof of work blockchains and also proof of stake blockchain. So for proof of stake blockchain, so there are different validators, especially for for the blockchains like Ethereum or Cosmos, that there are different validator are running the proof of stake consensus, and what we need to do is that first it's a valid validator set, and also they are generating the correct we are we are generating proof for their signatures for each validators of a proof of stake network. In that way, we capture all the consensus level formation of a blockchain, and what we are doing is that we relay the proof generation network will relay the block header of the sender chain and get verified on the receiver chain.
You said bridge committee. I don't quite understand what bridge committee is. Can you briefly explain what this means?
Bridge committee is that so traditionally for some cross-chain bridges, there are some bridge operators to decide or to vote. They are also use so for the bridge committee. So the bridge sometimes they use a consensus to decide the cross-chain status. Is that maybe a transaction happen on sender chain, whether it's valid and whether the transaction can be correctly, the information can be correctly relayed to the receiver chain.
Beautiful.
For instance, maybe user initiate a transaction, maybe want to do a cross-chain transaction from Ethereum to BNB Chain for 10,000 USDT. Then the bridge committee will decide whether the transaction actually happened on the sender chain.
Ah, I see. Okay. So it's a really efficient relayer. And and now it makes more sense of what you meant by multi-organization standards. You're trying to kind of really set that in as a kind of a cornerstone for the amount of trustlessness that is then incurred by how you are then relaying information from one chain to the other. So I think with mass adoption, I don't know what's the size of this committee can really be, but this is a really solid transition to Koii, because Koii is expecting and tries to expect millions of people servicing, and perhaps a huge committee can be a part of this. And I think it's really kind of up in the air with what exactly your interpretation is right now, Al. And I'm really kind of curious to hear your response to what you're hearing from some of this. Again, I'd like to know your personal solution of how you actually see how you see enabling trustlessness into all user interactions, and really what is the core technology that you're trying to use for all user interactions.
Sure. So first off, ZK is definitely the future for this kind of stuff. First off, just because it allows you to have a significant amount of increased privacy for a lot of these systems. And that's something that people are increasingly looking for. In terms of how we handle bridge validations, it's very similar. So you have a sender contract from the chain that's actually sending the transaction, and then you have a recipient contract on the other side that mints either wrapped tokens or some kind of a data payload. So in the case of like some types of NFT or DAO contracts, you might not want to actually transfer assets. You might be looking to transfer data. The thing that we do, which is a little bit different, is this sort of, it's almost like onion routing, if anybody's familiar with that. So the way that onion routing works is you have essentially a payload that's passed around the network through a bunch of different nodes, which are each, in our case, staking tokens. So they're all staking tokens as collateral. And you're passing this payload around through them until it gets enough signatures. And once it gets enough signatures, it gets submitted onto the recipient chain. And this is usually sort of a multi-sig wallet that has authority to either mint wrapped tokens or transfer data or something of that regard. And the trick that we found is that from a security perspective, it's better to have a lot of validators. And the more validators you have, the more secure your transfer becomes. Ideally, you have a lot of collateral for those validators, but even if you don't have a ton of collateral, if you can track their reputation over time, it's possible to also coordinate them in a way that's increasingly Sybil resistant and has a very significant chance of catching any failure. So the failure case here, though, is probably worth exploring. What could happen in a bridge like this, and what's happened when a lot of bridges get exploited, is that someone creates what looks like a successful deposit to the sender chain, and then they withdraw all kinds of funds from the receiver chain. And they're able to do that because the transaction gets verified by a bunch of people that are not any longer trustworthy. And so if you have a lot of validators get compromised at the same time, then the recipient chain doesn't really know any difference, right? The smart contract over there is just looking for enough signatures with enough collateral, and then it will unlock it. And so what can happen is you can have a deposit that's not real into the sender chain, and then you can have the wallet on the recipient chain get drained. And that can be really, really bad. Or worse yet, you can do it the other way, which is kind of what happened to Wormhole Hack. And so in the Wormhole Hack, a fake deposit was done. That moved money into the recipient chain, which in that case was Solana. And then that person who had the money on the recipient chain was able to bridge it back out onto the sender chain on Ethereum and sell it. And in those cases, there's like very little you can do at that point, because now it's not even the wrapped token on the recipient chain. It's like actually they've withdrawn the money out of the sender chain, and then it's just gone forever. Wow. And so the trick there that's really helpful is you can do this both ways. And so the better your validators are, the more you can analyze the recipient chain and the sender chain, and the more you can identify those kinds of attempts to hack the system. And the thing that we've done is to try to implement mostly the incentive standards, so that with a Koii task, for example, you can set very specific technical specifications for how you'd like to incentivize people. And you can incentivize them to slash other people's stake by auditing them. And so if you see anything wrong, you can slash that person very quickly and then remove them from the signer list that's available on either the recipient or the sender chain. And then they're no longer able to sign transactions. And if they try to actually push a payload in, then the network won't let that actually out of the bridge. And that's fast enough that you wouldn't be able to get the money back to the sender chain to actually withdraw it, which is the optimal course. There are definitely still some edge cases in most of these types of systems. There's definitely attacks where, like, if you're able to hack, a certain number of the validator nodes, then you could take over the system. Or if you're willing to risk enough collateral to take down a network, you could do that as well. So there's always like kind of the 51% attack kind of model. Our approach so far, though, is that if you have enough validators, then you can do a lot of these things more securely. And so if you can get up to the point where you have 10 or 20,000 validators for a bridge like this, and each transaction requires maybe 50 or 100 signatures, then it becomes extremely hard to figure out who those nodes are going to be ahead of time, especially if you can randomly select them. And then it becomes very, very, very difficult to get the money out of the bridge that's in there. And the money in the bridge becomes very, very secure. So that's mostly how we're looking at it. I think there's a lot of ways that you can implement the proof infrastructure, and the off-chain compute part of it. Like, there's a lot of ways to actually audit those off-chain compute cycles. And so ZK proofs are one way of going through all of the off-chain compute and auditing it. What we found is, honestly, it kind of comes down to who you trust. So with the IDEXO bridge, for example, the IDEXO community has been active for quite a while. And so they're going to be staking IDEXO tokens as part of that community. And they've got sort of an NFT and a DID system in place to track reputation of those people. And so if it's a reliable party that's part of the system, it's been there for a while, they can be one of those 10,000 validators. And if not, then it's a lot harder for them to join the system.
Oh, wow. So this has got me very curious, because now I'm seeing some really interesting kind of looking at all of this. As I look at my whiteboard, I by the way, Al, thank you for explaining all the different wormhole hacks and like these other hacks and explaining how that kind of works. And I really understand how you're using Onion to route these messages amongst many different validators, and then you're getting this receiving message on the receiving chain, and then you're kind of using a multi-sig to kind of like unlock these wraps, and then you need a lot of validators to really make sure that it's done in the most secure and efficient way possible. You're very aware of all the problems and the security loops that are kind of in here. So you have some like slashing stake, and you're removing signatures for various different reasons. But there was one really interesting thing that you said, which was it ultimately it comes down to who you trust in the very beginning. And the topic today is trust and trustless. And I want to understand this idea of trust and trustlessness. I do agree with you, and I think this is what Abner you're alluding to, is that you're using ZK to really kind of validate the security of these messages in the most efficient way possible, so that there's so that these sorts of security loopholes aren't looped. And you're using ZK as like a really kind of a future technology to do something that's very similar in regards to what Koii is thinking about as well. So it doesn't seem like the way that we bridge has very changed, except that it's now getting stronger and stronger, and you guys are aware of how to strengthen that. So that's really cool to hear. But again, I want to leave it as an open-ended question and get your guys' perspectives on this. Like, what do you guys mean by it comes down to who you trust? So this is can
I qualify it ever so slightly? I'd actually be really curious to hear what your thoughts are on this, Abner. The question that we've asked a lot of the time is, in terms of compatibility, like there's a lot of underlying primitives that are required in each of these contracts for the bridge to work. Like you have to have some stuff on the recipient and sender chain that at least supports the same signature primitives. And so with these kind of ZK proofs, the trick is usually verifying them on the recipient chain in order to unlock the funds. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys do that? Sounds very interesting.
Yeah, what we are doing, actually, we are doing a general framework that actually we don't track. So actually we are providing the system that only do it's like a global state machine that it relay the status of a standard system to a receiver system by using zero-knowledge proof. And the proof generation is off-chain, and the proof verification on the receiver chain side is on-chain. We don't exactly dealing with specific application side. So for each of the transactions, so we can use the proof generation for the block header, and on the receiver chain side, automatically verify the block header. And for the transaction level, we can use the block header proof verification plus the Merkle tree proof for transaction. So for each application, we don't care about actually which kind of cross-chain logic. For instance, maybe it's a token bridge, token transfer, NFT transfer, or message passing between two blockchain systems. So for any of the applications, they can use our block header relay network, our ZK bridge system to use the verified block header from the sender chain. And on the receiver chain side, the application can use the verified block header. Together, they can get the exactly transaction status by using the block header and also the Merkle tree proof for the transactions. And so on transaction level, so we don't handle the application, the smart contract for the application side. So the application, they need additional security on their smart contracts.
Cool. That's a really good note to point at, actually, because now we just shifted the discussion over to the smart contractors that are out there, and we say, y'all have to make, smarter contracts. And that's, I mean, it's not like a pressure. I would say this is just natural, and we have to always have the highest security standards possible. So, Al, is that really it? Did that answer your question?
I'd have to do a little bit of Googling. What I've run into in the past is that it's kind of tricky to verify a ZK proof inside of an EVM contract. So within Solidity, I don't think there's a primitive for it. But hey, we might have just come up with a pretty good EIP. So maybe we should submit it to the Ethereum Foundation. That could be an amazing primitive if they were to actually support that in those contracts. Are you aware of any chains that support this natively, Abner?
Yeah, currently we can support the automatic proof verification on EVM blockchain. On the receiver chain side, it's just a smart contract to do the proof verification. And for the prover side, that we are generating proof for the EVM for Ethereum network, Cosmos, BNB Chain, and many other blockchain systems.
Well, you guys are killing it right now, and I love the way that we're flinging ideas around right now. So I'm gonna just leave another question for the end, and I wanna break down a little bit further because I think we have more questions for you, Abner, and you have something really interesting going on with ZKP. And I was looking at Polyhedra's site. And I know that you guys are doing something in ETH Denver this year. I think you're sponsoring, and there's going to be some stuff that you're going to be coming out with. And I looked at your site, and it says that you're doing you're implementing technologies in ZKDID, NFT, POAPs, and you have the bridge. So is the Polyhedra bridge meant to make these technologies private or trustless by default, or is that something that is chosen by the user? How does the privacy work in tandem with what you're solving for with Polyhedra?
Yeah. So the fundamental problem we are solving is that the interoperability problem, the solutions in Web3. So for different applications, so we can handle. So for ZK Bridge, it's a general infrastructure for the interoperability for cross-chain bridges that we are providing the general infrastructure for the proof of the block header or the consensus of the standard chain. And if the application need a cross-chain transaction or cross-chain data interoperability, so we can directly use our ZK Bridge framework. So if the DID and also the POP or also the NFT application in multi-chain, they want to do the cross-chain interoperability, the technology is based on ZK Bridge. However, for some of the applications that are not multi-chain, the transactions happen on the same chain, and also sometimes they also care about privacy. So then we have a privacy extension which is pluggable into the ZK Bridge that we do a privacy extension to hide the sender and the receiver of a transaction. So we have many ways to do it. So currently, Vitalik have a blog about the steals address. So currently we implement the steals address model and we recommend the steals address model to solve the privacy problem.
The steals address model. I've heard about this, and but steals or stealth? Stealth. My bad. So stealth model. So you're agreeing with Vitalik's output on stealth. So that's cool. You're using stealth addressing, which in my understanding is using an existing. It's very similar to how L2 like ZNS with ZK BNB works, where when I register a ZNS on layer 2, it's an equivalent of my existing address on layer 1. So it's almost like a one-to-one address, and there's no difference between the two, except that now my wallet now has this address. So is this similar? So you have you would have to then register a stealth address on the chain first before you're able to then use the privacy extension to cut the link between the sending and the receiving addresses. And when you say cut the link, you mean like literally the token price, the token amount, the token, anything about the token, and it's any token like the DID, the NFT, the POAP. Is this true?
Yes, for the stealth address model, so actually they can not hide the actual transactions. Actually, they are using an alternative address. We call it stealth address to build the transactions. Actually, the stealth address, the belonging of the stealth address about the meta address or the source address is hidden. So nobody can link the relationship between the stealth address and the real address of a user. In this way, the user can hide his real address for the transactions.
Very cool. Yeah.
For each time of the transactions, just use the stealth address, and the stealth address can be automatically generating from the application or the sender.
I think you're explaining right now is and this is really the core question of what's behind the ZK bridge, which is this stealth technology that you're using. And when you cut the link of the source address, you're really kind of cutting the link to a lot of things. And that link is still public on the other side on the destination chain, but I can't link back at all to who actually sent that transaction, which makes for a fully private transfer. You can debate that it's not fully private. You can debate that it's not totally secret, but I don't really know if we're looking for total secrecy. So I wasn't expecting to ask you about your opinion on privacy versus pseudo anonymity and secrecy, but like, what do you think is the state of privacy in Web3, and like, how do you think privacy needs to be used in the applications that you believe are the most important? Cutting the link seems to be really important for a variety of use cases, but I'm kind of curious on what you think it's going to be most heavily used for in industry practice.
Yeah, I think that currently for the most important case is that about the data sharing, especially for the cases like the DID and also the interoperability between the data from Web 2 to Web 3. So for token transfer that there already exists solution like Tornado Cash. However, the Tornado Cash solution may also face some compliance problem that is fully is a fully privacy that nobody can identify it has an anonymous sender receiver and also can hide the amount. So in that way, it's very hard for third party to audit or to do the compliance based on a Tornado Cash model. So what we care about is that the privacy needs from the end user of sharing a data, especially for the use cases in the metaverses, in DID, or in Web 2 and Web 3 interoperability. In this kind of use case, I think cutting the link between the stealth address and the source address is enough. So by using ZK Bridge, so for the end-to-end transaction, so we have the application smart contract on the standard chain. We have the bridge. The major part of the bridge is the relay network, the relayer between the sender chain and the receiver chain. And the third part is the application smart contract on the receiver chain side. So the stealth address model can be compatible with. It happened on the application smart contract side on the sender chain and receiver chain, and also the zero knowledge proof of generating a stealth address is compatible with ZK Bridge, so that we can do the end-to-end privacy.
Wow, this is very in depth, and I like the approach, and I like how you brought it back to Tornado Cash. So for anybody who doesn't know, that Tornado Cash was recently sanctioned because of the problems that it had as a mixing service. So like what you're doing is not mixing anything. You're there is a core difference in the technology with how Tornado Cash was taking assets and then cutting the link in their way by mixing a bunch of assets into a pool together, I believe, and then sending it to the other side while cutting the link. And it's completely impossible to distinguish who was the sender and the receiver, even on the same chain to other chains. So there was no absolute way to audit. So you believe in audible privacy, which is really good to hear, because I think that is going to be the tried true practice for a lot of these different services that we're going to start seeing enter into the industry itself. Since I can imagine things like bank remittancy being a huge thing when I have to deposit money from one bank to another bank that's not the same bank, and they need to give back money to the other. There's a huge practice in industry for banking for remitting finances back to the other side, and they have to do this anonymously because they can't show their they cannot show their balances or their balance sheets. And I would say the same is the same for even maybe even AMMs that need to be trading yield with one another. So different DeFi applications need to be trading yield in a private way. So instead of the user, maybe it's more of like the actual application and the smart contracts trading yield. And that's important to actually make confidential so that no one is actually then, maybe doing some crazy DeFi logic that's screwing over customers or something. I don't know. I'm just really kind of throwing my shade up into the air. So I'd like to go back to you, Al, and ask you about, some of the pressing questions that I think everyone really has is, what really do you think is the major use case for privacy? Briefly, before I kind of go into some more kind of deeper technical talk about Koii Network, I just want to get your opinion on what you think needs to be private.
If it's me, preferably everything, I think. It's pretty obvious to me that the internet has now created this massive need from consumers. So the vast majority of products, I used to work in the advertising industry, and the vast majority of projects online right now have essentially compromised to pay their hosting costs. And so they've had to instantiate some kind of an ad model, at which point consumer surveillance is almost necessary in order to make your ad revenue go up. So almost everything on the internet is almost spying on you. Like, it's not exactly spying on you, but it's spending a lot of time correlating who you are and trying to show you the right ad at the right time so you'll click on something so that someone makes money. And it's necessary to do so because at some point someone has to pay all the hosting costs. So the thing that we see is, for the most part, people want everything that they don't want to share to be entirely private. And if they want to share something, that's the only time that it should be public. And that means, your banking history, your kind of public or private correspondence. Like, even at this point, I think WhatsApp just had a giant data breach. So if you're using WhatsApp, probably switch over to using Signal. In most cases, the consumer protections don't really exist for most of these systems because you say yes to the terms and conditions. And it's usually worded as, we will help you to use this product better, or we want to get feedback from you by monitoring what you use this product for. But at the end of the day, it's not really good enough anymore. And I think the more that you look at kind of the rise of authoritarianism around the world, the more you're realizing that having any information about you on the internet is actually almost a bad thing. Because depending on where you live, that can immediately be used against you. And if you're aware of the way the world's trending right now, we're heading towards a pretty inflationary and potentially bad economic environment, which could lead governments around the world, even in places that are currently very safe and very comfortable, it could lead them into a pretty bad spot as well, where that kind of information could be very valuable to them. So people should probably be protecting their privacy as much as they can.
I love that. And I think you're absolutely right. And you personally have spoken a lot about giving people the options. So I think in terms of audibility and privacy, that is an option that people have at their disposal. Whether they want something to be completely public or private, they should at least be given the option. So I like your approach. But you've also spoken heavily about where data actually lives and how it's owned and how it's operated and where it's used. I watched a lot of your videos, Al, about this, and you have a really large breadth of knowledge about this topic, and I want to know, why are we needing to build trustlessness in our bridging technology now, and really, how is this furthering the Koii Network's vision for a more decentralized, data-owned economy?
So the example here would be if you look at a social network like Facebook or Twitter or something like that, right? I won't say that they necessarily are handing over all the data to governments, though they very well might be based on what Edward Snowden has said. The question is, if you have an organization like that that's providing a service, at what point can the investors and the economic constituents of that organization be pressured into compliance. And so if you are, say, the investor in the next Facebook or the next Twitter or the next Signal, for example, even like a very secure messaging platform, or Discord for that matter, if you're an investor in those kinds of networks and you do have some kind of control or some kind of governance rights, and you can be personally pressured, that could lead to a course that is not advantageous for the consumers or the end community of that platform. And so this kind of technology, especially bridging and transaction-oriented technology being private, increases the utility for not only the investors, but for the actual consumers as well. Because you need to have that full loop of privacy all the way down to the person at the end of the day who financed the thing. Otherwise, there's going to eventually be a weak point that can be exploited. And privacy it makes it a lot harder to spot your enemy, I think. And for a lot of the governments in the world right now, it's very easy to see who's behind a lot of these projects because it's all open and it's all just, especially in blockchain, it's all on the chain and it's all public knowledge. And so if you can trace one of those things back and go to the KYC address, then you've got somebody on the end of the day who's on the hook for the speech of all the people on that platform. And that could lead to limiting speech on the platform. It could lead to regimes that don't want certain types of content out there, pressuring the platform to take them down, even if the decentralized community doesn't want that. And at the end of the day, like even if you have a decentralized protocol, someone has to pay the developers. And so if the developers that care about privacy all get fired, then the platform's probably not going to respect your wishes.
So thank you for that. And I totally agree. I think like with Facebook being like one of the number one, kind of data giveaways. And we all know that they're looking at our data. Even TikTok is looking at all of our data. So that's one major point. But really what you're looking at is you're questioning the big picture question, which is eventually when will these companies that are even in Web3 are going to be pressured into compliance? And so naturally, a lot of big companies want to limit speech in general, even right now with a lot of social media companies. And we're seeing this now with the Twitter file outreach that's happening ever since Elon bought Twitter. And now we get all the access to all that data and we see what was really going on. So, I mean, a good question that I want to follow up with is then we build all this trustless stuff and anyone's able to service this. We have Polyhedra able to kind of unleash this open source ZKP trustless bridging technology for anyone to use, and you enable it into Koii Network. But do you see this getting out of hand? Like, who is then the responsible party for these audible trustless bridging pieces of tech? Because if they're hyper secure and they're able to make sure that your data is publicly private, and by publicly private, I mean, it's like it could be audited, but then it's also completely anonymous. What do you think the fear is then for companies that are trying to limit this, since I think this would be a better solution for a majority of consumers to then fall on to these sorts of systems? How do you see trustlessness then getting out of hand if somebody like those companies can't really control it for themselves?
I don't think at the end of the day that we need companies, or for that matter, governments, to be controlling us. I actually got Koii, the Koii Labs company in Canada, got debanked after I did an interview about Tornado Cash, where I said something very similar, which is effectively that governments should be using their skills and their tools and the information they have resources to access to prosecute people. And so if you are part of a drug cartel and you're laundering money, and that money allows you to buy a house, and you show up with a really nice house in a country where you're not supposed to have a bunch of money showing up suddenly, that would probably be a good reason for them to investigate you. And they can monitor using traditional surveillance mechanisms and get a warrant and watch you. And it's not that hard to catch somebody who is an abject criminal being an abject criminal, because it's probably pretty obvious, and they'll probably get caught doing something completely separate. They took down Al Capone for, I think, essentially tax evasion. And in that case, like, that's just who he was. He wasn't somebody that was going to comply with those kinds of rules, and he was keeping a lot of money in his mattress or whatever it was. And they were able to catch him on a technicality when he filed his taxes. And so there's lots of ways to hold people accountable that don't require you to surveil the entire population.
That's so funny. And I see, Abner, what you're doing is like, and now I have a greater appreciation. It's like you guys are really enabling the social finance of the world. Like we have our own options and our own abilities to trust even more trustworthy parties. Like I'm putting my trust into the technologies that you guys are building, but then you are also assuring me that you are trying to make it as secure as possible, decentralized as possible, and as efficient as possible so that we can have our own creator economy without relying on the tools and the tech that we're essentially tied to in the banking system. So that sounds just off the ear, sounds in a sense radical. So Abner, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Like, and it seems like we go down the rabbit hole even further. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think in the future, so both for the interoperability and for the privacy, so the solution, the tech solution is customizable. So the users and applications can decide what level of the security or what level of the trustlessness or what level of the privacy they can use. Because I think that so in the future, I think so what we are doing is that we are providing generalized zero-knowledge proof system to support the interoperability and privacy. And for the privacy part is a plugin and the application to decide. If they don't have a privacy need, then they don't need this plugin. For the interoperability, so it's a general infrastructure. You can imagine it's like a general state transition machine. It's like a trustless TCP IP protocols between heterogeneous systems of Web3 and also connecting Web 2 and Web 3. And our solution is not a single solution. So in the system level, so always we need to get rid of a single point failure. So for the ZK bridge, so it can be work as an end-to-end cross-chain bridge. So it can also be it is also composable, and it can also be incorporated into other block bridge system. That the other bridge, they can have a they can use ZK bridge as a relayer to consolidate the message passing between the sender chain and the receiver chain, to consolidate their relayer by using our ZK bridge. And from the application side, they can decide what kind of stacks, the technical stacks, they will use to guarantee the security of a cross-chain transactions. So if they are not happy with the relayer, they can choose adding a ZK bridge as a trustless relayer from sender chain to receiver chain. If they are not happy with the security of the smart contract on the application side, so currently we don't handle this, but we can integrate with other solutions. So maybe they need another optimistic transaction bridge that to check the status of the transaction. So there are different kind of mechanisms, and user can trade off. So if they need a stronger security guarantee, so maybe the customer may pay more fees, or they need to wait more time for the final verify or the final confirmation of a cross-chain transaction.
Man, the next episode we have to have has to be about security of contracts, because we keep following onto this thing of making sure that the contract is as secure as possible. So that has to be the next episode, guys.
Great.
Seriously, because you just really framed it so well again, and the users are deciding the level of privacy that they actually then have, because it's a generalized ZKP. They choose or they choose not to use. But in that same sense of choosing is this term that a lot of people don't necessarily hear all the time, which is called composability, which is whether or not this can be like composed. Like when I'm putting it into some other system, and then that system can run this logic in the same exact way. It really kind of comes down to whether or not these contracts are equally as secure. So it's not that your solution is insecure. You've built it to be as secure as possible. And that's really the point and purpose of your tech. It's really comes down to then what is then tagging along with it, and then how are they implementing your solution in the most secure way possible. So I think you guys have a really solid thing going on. And also, Al, I was watching more of your videos. I watched all of your videos, and I was looking at your keynote at Decentricon, and it was so sick. I loved what you said. You said Koii Network slogan is decentralize or die. And I wanted to know if this is like really still the key motivation that you have behind building your trustless bridge as well.
Yeah, I should say that's some intended as a threat. It's very much meant to be a sort of a statement from a philosophical perspective. I used to work in robotics, and after graduating with a robotics degree, I was at job fairs, and a lot of the people there were defense contractors. And I was starting to get a little concerned by watching that. And then recently, this video came out of a Boston Dynamics dog with an M16 strapped to its back, running around in a field and shooting things. And that's very frightening. Because at some point in the distant future, if we get into the dystopian reality that may be impending with resource shortages and that kind of thing, there's a very real possibility that your on-chain records of who you are and the IDs that you connect to them could actually be a significant point against you in that world, allowing you to be targeted not only by governments, but also by other organizations that might have these kinds of little robotic predators so they can send after you. And that's a very frightening reality that could quite realistically happen. Facial recognition software is more than good enough now for a robotic dog to follow somebody around. So that's the very scary side of it. The one thing that we didn't get into too much, which I would love to talk about, is the DID side. And I noticed Polyhedra also has their own ZK DID that they're working on. I think this is probably the really interesting angle that's probably going to happen next. And the question isn't so much like, obviously we can obfuscate a lot of the stuff that happens on a blockchain, and we can have lots of ways of disconnecting blockchains from one another so that things are a little bit cleaner and there's a lot less information getting leaked out as you wander around the internet. But the next layer, of course, is that you have to have a DID that you can then also connect to your wallets that can allow you to be a person when you need to be a person and allow you to be anonymous when you need to be anonymous, or pseudonymous for that matter. And that layer, I think, is probably the really important next step. So we've been working on reputation systems a lot at Koii. And it's one of the, I think, most important ways that this system will move forward. Especially like not only that, but also on the trust layer. You need to also be able to verify who people are so they can join your community. You need civil resistance at a Discord level, for example. Like even just joining to do this call, I had to verify my phone number to join. And I don't know if I always want my phone number to be connected to the things I join. So having ZK proofs for that layer as well will be hugely important.
I see how you're plugging in the logic into today's open source technology, which is so cool. Because I think I look at it in the same way, where I go on to the internet and I want to download it could be a wallet, it could be anything. Like I downloaded Discord that's open source and I get to use it, play with it, customize it, do all sorts of things. But you're alluding mainly to how the ZK DID property is something that can actually then interface with a lot of these existing technologies that are as well open source. And now we have other things like OpenAI, which is open sourced, and how can ZK DID get in touch with this thing? And maybe AIs have their own ZK DID that they do or do not share certain information with specific people, even if it's an open source network. And maybe in that open source network, people can't have certain information. Maybe it's a private network. You're really, both of you just talked about the customizability that is, I think, so cool about our industry. And then blockchain and the things that we're doing are really just leveraging these abilities to have message passing in the most secure way possible that is transparent and can be used by anybody, which comes down to how decentralized is that system to make those sorts of protocols really efficient. And so I like that, Al. It's awesome. So what is your understanding of MPC, Abner? And can you kind of allude to some of like maybe the misconceptions that people might have in and around this topic of NPC and MPC? Can you care to explain?
Yeah, I think for the NPC, it should be better we don't care about who is actually doing the computation. So it's like it's a general computation that no matter who is doing the computation, we can always verify that the statement is true or false. That everyone it's like a permissionless proof generation, permissionless party for the computation, and for MPC actually we care about the parties. Is a permission. It's like a permission, like a consortium to doing the computation.
And so I'm not going to break down whether you are not using this, because again, you're going with a more generalized approach of how to implement bridging. So what like I see MPC being used often with a lot of these stacks, and I see NPC being used often or not so often with some other stacks. So like, do you know what the core difference is in terms of why one is used over the other? Like why would I trust this versus trust this? Because am I right to say and claim that this is a trusted version and this is a trustless? Or is that the misconception that I have? Is this right or wrong?
Yes. So for MPC, it depends on the cost to break the system. To bribe the multi-party or make a false or make an attack to the system. I think it's an economic problem, and for the trustless for ZK model, that is based on the security of cryptography.
And that security of cryptography is pretty strong. So you're using a secure model, I am assuming, and using stealth addressing to kind of get in touch with these smart contracts, and that's good. Thank you for distinguishing the difference, because I think that really kind of touches base one last time on how we distinguish the difference between trust and trustlessness.
One last thought on that one, Dylan. The thing that we've noticed with ZK stuff is that there's a layering issue, right? So if you have a ZK proof occurring on multiple lines of code, it depends on what the code is doing. So if it's like a high traffic API server, it's not exactly feasible to do that. And so what we've tried to implement in many of the cases with our ecosystem projects is the statistical and probabilistic security beyond just the core cryptography. Because if you have an enormous group of people that can be selected from, it's very hard to coordinate an attack. Whereas if you implement ZK across the entire system, there's sort of a limitation of the efficiency. So there's this concept of a replication factor, which in multi-party compute basically means like how many people do you have to get to do the thing before the thing is confirmed. And in multi-party compute, you can often get that number as low as 2 or 3, and sometimes even down to like 1.5 if you have a good reputation system. Whereas with ZK, a lot of the time it can be like 4 to 6 or sometimes even higher, depending on how the proofs are generated and what the algorithm is. And so there's definitely different applications for these stacks depending on how you approach it. And in many cases, you can still have privacy guarantees even if you're using a multi-party system. But that would just be my final note on the thought. The idea of a no-party compute system is absolutely amazing if you can pull it off. I think that's basically how, like, if you look at the EVM, it's more or less NPC at this point, because there's so much money tied up in it that it's effectively guaranteed that the EVM will compute things without trusting any one person. But there's balances to this as you're building the application stack, is what we usually say.
Nice. Thank you for elaborating on that a little bit deeper on MPC as well, because I've heard the argument multiple times in saying that, it's the moment that you trust any one person, it can end up, you have like very large proofs, and these proofs are very hard to kind of compute. And then you have to rely a lot on like what the client is able to do and rely on the client's actual hardware. So what I mean by that is We just had a discussion yesterday with Noir, and their solution was, well, if we're going to be generating a ZKP, then it's going to have to come from that client. And then that client then generates that proof, and that program is already, I'm imagining it's already precompiled. We didn't ask that question whether or not that was true. So then there are the other solutions, which is that you're using a DSL to then privately compute things. So that could be one way of making it a little bit faster. You just put Plonks and Gras16 into it, which are like your proving systems, into the actual language itself to prove that level of privacy. And then you can still use an MPC to kind of fasten the approach. So there's multiple ways of going about it. And I'm happy we're able to finally have 2 episodes now where we can really deep dive into ZKP, MPC, bridging, and all this stuff. So it's super sick that I think we're getting it from a ton of different angles. So what is something that you particularly want BNB developers to know about your technology before they start using it on the BNB chain? Is it possible to use BNB right now? And how can they use BNB right now with, say, like with Koii Network right now? What can a BNB developer expect to use Koii for if they were to use it tomorrow?
So the primary reason we implemented Koii is so that you can have lots of people for your multi-party systems. And so if you have a smart contract and it's being maintained in any way, like if you're issuing tokens or if you have NFTs and it's related to some kind of an off-chain functionality, Koii allows you to get lots and lots and lots of people to verify that activity for a very low cost. It goes down to as easy as writing some JavaScript or TypeScript that you can run on our nodes. And then you get lots and lots of people to use their signing keys to verify your contracts. We currently have grants available for that. So if you want to tap into our network of 45,000 computers, we'd be very happy to give you some free credits to try it on the system. And that's docs.koii.network if anybody's looking for Koii with 2 I's. And there's also a Discord, discord.gg/Koii, where we can help you out.
Yeah, I love the way that you can, you can have a single contract, but that have it all be signed by a ton of different people, and everyone's running the same service and many, many various services. And it sounded like I could use it for even storage transfer and data transfer, which I think would be particularly interesting with greenfield storage providers. So do you guys work with any sort of storage providers? I know that you were doing something with Arweave. So do you also work with like a variety of DSNs as well?
The idea is to be completely open standard. So the task creator can write in any type of support they'd like for any kind of storage network. We natively support IPFS as our kind of primary option, just because the CID indexing is very straightforward. And we have some very strong relationships with the Filecoin team, so we can also provide grants on that side. But happy to help people integrate other options as well. Just makes the stack bigger and better.
Solid. Yeah, we have Greenfield now. So this is our DSN. It's its own decentralized cloud storage network as well. Very similar to IPFS, but with other trade-offs that are pretty exciting, radically decentralized and all these other things. And we'd love to see some of the optionalities that I think, Abner, you were alluding to. I know we've privately spoken before about what you're excited with the BNB network and what sort of solutions that you think you're going to have. Maybe you don't have to talk about it right now, but with Greenfield, it's really exciting. So what's something that you want to tell BNB developers about your tech, how you want to have them start using it? Where should they go? What would you like BNB to know?
So what we want to do is that we want to provide a general zero-knowledge proof infrastructure to support the BNB chain. So currently we implement the ZK bridge, and it can be used for the interoperability between BNB chain and other blockchain system, for a secure cross-chain bridge between BNB chain and also between BNB chain and other blockchain like Ethereum, Cosmos, and Phantom, and also Arbitrum, Polygon, different kind of cross-chain bridges between BNB chain and other chains. And also for the data interoperability, we hope to be integrating with BNB Greenfield. That BNB Greenfield is extremely excited because it provides general data availability layer to of Web3, and we think that we can unleash the power of decentralization of the storage system, and also for the data ownership and the data economy. And also our ZK-DID can provide scalable infrastructure to be integrated with different verifiable credentials and support any kind of credential issuer to provide both a scalable and privacy preserving proofs for the verifiable credentials. So we will gradually have more developer tools and to attract more developers to build on our ecosystem. And also recently, we also help on the proof of reserve system to provide a better zero-knowledge proof system to support the proof of reserve of the Binance. That currently the proof of reserve systems are using zero-knowledge proof for scalability and privacy.
Wow. Thank you. Where can people find you?
So people can find me at the BNB, our joint event with BNB Chain on East Denver, and also can join our social media for both Twitter and also Discord.
At Polyhedra, what's your Twitter handle?
It's Polyhedra ZK, and our website is polyhedra.network.
Al, where do you want people to go? Where do you want people to find Koii?
The best way to get in touch is usually to follow us on Twitter at Koii Network, KOII-NETWROK. And then there's that Discord again, discord.gg/KOII. The last thing I wanted to mention as well, I forgot to say this before, we also have a founder support program out now. So if anybody's working on building anything, even if you're already working with some of our competitors, we'd love to help you out. We're really just here to try and make decentralization happen as quickly as possible. And Abner, I would love to try and help you get this to mass adoption as well. It sounds like really amazing primitives you guys are building.
Great stuff. I definitely like the direction that everything's going in. It's just been taking too long. From a marketing adoption standpoint, again, since we're all kind of working on things that happen under the hood, getting those kinds of basic infrastructures and kind of service suppliers to adopt is probably the strategy to integrate. And I wonder if it might be possible to make it in a way so it's easy for maybe at the user level to have that most basic secure transaction. I mean, we're trying to show everybody that we need security on the most basic layer, but I don't think people quite understand the importance of it. And maybe they never will. It's going to be an interesting challenge to solve.
Al, Abner, thank you guys so much for your time today. And we will call it a wrap. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody who's listening to this, please make sure that you tell your friends to try out Signal or encrypted messaging solutions. It's about time everybody gets in there. Yeah, thank you so much for organizing.
Use Signal.